Hi guys, welcome to Healeyverse Creations, place where pretty much anything could be next. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this leather handbag pouch thing. Stay tuned, see how we get on. Okay, so first of all, brief rundown. This is a Christmas present for my mother. I know what you're thinking. That's a tall order, isn't it? Trying to impress the mother, trying to not only get the mother a handbag that she would wear and carry around and that wouldn't just get thrown in a wardrobe, but to make it yourself. That's a tall order, especially if you know my mother. But, challenge set. The pattern that I'm going to be using is not templated. It's the same sort of pouch I've made in every other video. It's just different layers, different colours, different sizes, really. Katie's was wider, Dad's was taller, my eldest was more compact, and my mum's is going to be more like the Dragon Ball Z pouch I made. The first thing that I'm going to be doing is roughing out. I'm going to do a paper template for this one, I'll show you here, and then you'll see me cutting all my pieces off from this same template. I did the front piece and the back piece both off this one template, just from where I had a fold line. That made it a lot easier to only have to use one template, because then using the paper template to fold where the top would fold over and then also where the front would fold down, I could just use that back corner fold to flatten the paper out, and that would give me the exact size template that I needed for the front piece of this pouch. So that was perfect. One template, and then all I did was have to cut myself a, according to Skill Tree's video, gusset. Now the gusset, for anyone who doesn't know, for anyone who hasn't seen his video, I'd be very surprised if you're watching this one. The gusset is the section of material that runs between the front and the back, essentially the bottom and the sides of the pouch. On my other pouches, I've made a pretty consistent effort of making sure that it was separate pieces. I have leather that's long enough, but I like the idea that it's one piece, one colour at the bottom, and then somewhere around the sides it transitions. After having selected what colours I was going to go for, Mum, when she talked about maybe if she got one in the future, she'd mentioned she liked black. Now I also know that my mum is a big fan of purple, so I figured I have purple leather, I have black leather, this is fine. I'll just try and find her a nice neutral piece that will make up the front, just to make it look a bit more rustic, a bit more authentic and leather, and not like it was bought in a shop using all black shiny leather. That was my first task, getting my pieces, getting my colours, figuring out how tall I wanted these purple sides to go, because the more I was looking at it, the more I was like, having the purple running up the sides of the black and the brown front that I chose was going to be a bit garish. So I did end up reducing those purple sides up and cutting them so they were much shorter than I had done with all the others. It was mainly the brown leather all the way up both sides. Now I think I did this gusset at, I want to say 40, maybe 50 millimeters width. So the pouch had 50 millimeters of depth from front to back. And then it was just a case of figuring out what length I wanted the first piece to go, attaching the purple bits to the top of it. One thing I did find that I struggled a little bit with when attaching the purple to the brown leather was, because they're both so thin, one of them actually started to overlap. I don't think I'd cut it perfectly straight, so I think when I got so far down it started to overlap and then pulled itself over, which is a bit annoying. But then obviously once it's all stitched all the way up the sides and everything, it'll hold it in shape. It won't actually make any difference in the end. But that was just one thing to be very mindful of. Make sure that when you're doing this, if you decide to do something like this yourself with this multi-coloured gusset idea, it looks great, but just be careful. Make sure your edges are all nice and straight, make sure everything's butt up and the stitching will hold it in that place and not allow it to slip off, because it can be a bit of a pain if it's not going to be suitably anchored into place later. I looked out, you may not, so be mindful. And then because this was a handbag, I had to figure out how I was going to anchor this one on. Obviously I added straps to the back of the Dragon Ball Z pouch that could then hold the chain on it, but I didn't love how that turned out. I wanted to try and make sure this one was a bit more sturdy and robust, because this one was specifically a handbag. The strap that I'm going to be using for this bag, it was actually given to me. I didn't make it. This is not my work. My mother, funnily enough, actually gave me this strap about a year ago when I started doing the leather projects. I didn't really know what to use it with until I started making this, and then I was like, oh, well, then didn't that go full circle? She kind of ended up getting it back. So, same as with the Dragon Ball Z pouch, I'm doubling up these layers because I want it to be nice and thick. On the front and back piece, it's going to be 2 layers. So they're getting glued together, and then stitching around the edges will hold them from separating again in the near future, I'm hoping. And then the additions that I put on the little accents, the straps, the closing buckles and whatnot, will also give them locks at the center point so that they shouldn't peel away in the middle either. Every finger crossed. You will also probably notice that I've cut the black piece of leather wider than the inside piece, because again, same thing I did with the Dragon Ball Z pouch. I want it to fold over around the sides and then have that stitched around so it's got a different coloured surround when you open it up. touch wood, that worked pretty well. Another thing I wanted to do was try and give my mum something that tied it to my eldest. Obviously, my mother, my daughter, I wanted to make sure that they both had something that made their pouches feel like almost a set. And I'll probably end up doing the same when I make my youngest daughter one as well, which was get some of this gold leather that I have on there. Because obviously, my eldest, I used it as like the Saiyan stripe on the underneath of the Dragon Ball pouch. On this one, I decided to use it as my anchor points for where the strap was going. So I bought these steel D-rings for the strap to hook onto. So it was just a case of, these are going to go on the sides. I figured if they sat on the purple bit, which again, when it came to deciding to shorten down the purple bit, it helped that then the gold was on there and even smaller, because it just made it look like there was this nice rustic brown black pouch with purple and gold accents on the sides, and we'll get there. All of a sudden the image was starting to become very clear in my head of how this thing was going to look by the time it was finished, and I was pretty excited for it, to be honest. I wanted to make sure all the stitching was nice and vibrant. I didn't want to be using black on black so that it'd be hidden, you wouldn't be able to see. I wanted to make sure everything had a purpose and everything was visible and everything added more detail if possible. So that was what I went for. Since this is one of my pouches still, I was going to add the back loops. Just because, you know, you never know. She may one day not want to use it on the strap and hang it on a belt or hang it on a coat belt or whatever. So we're leaving the back straps. That is going to be my thing. For the most part, they'll be out of the way. They won't be used. They shouldn't snag on anything. They're nice and snug and they're nice and wide. So any size belt will go through them. The kind of stitching that I'm going to be doing for the most part on this project is called a whip stitch. So the whip stitch is basically you're running through the holes, and the next hole 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 at your two edges. So where the sides meet the front, you're then going to have a hole this side and a hole that side, and your stitch is going to go through that hole and then over to the next hole and then over to the next hole. Very simple. Actually quite therapeutic. That's the section of these pouches I actually quite enjoy doing, to be honest with you. That's the bit that I'm like, I can just... Great. And then the second type of stitching that I'm going to be using in this is, I believe it's a saddle stitch. However, I do it slightly differently. Traditionally, people, when they do a saddle stitch, they will feed the needles through, both through one hole in either direction, pull them, up through the next hole in either direction, pull them. I do this the opposite way. I go all the way through like a running stitch, and then once I get to the top, I can go over and come back around the opposite sides, so that you get that double stitch in either side. But rather than trying to force both needles through both holes at a time, pretty simple. Reverse running stitch, that's what I'm going to call it from now on, but it ends up being a saddle stitch. The running stitch can be a bit fiddly coming back the other way, especially with something else that I've been doing at the moment, which you'll see that one soon. Pretty much everything on this is going to be those two types of stitching. The front and back are going to be attached via whip stitch to the sides. The purple tops of the side gusset are going to be attached to the bottom section of the gusset using a whip stitch. Every other edge, every other attachment, every other embellishment on this thing is going to be saddle stitch, reverse running stitch. Another thing I found when I was doing this, that I actually realised when I was doing the Dragon Ball Z pouch, was that if you run a punch through the edges where you're planning on curving your leather and then run a stitch through that, it kind of breaks the back of the leather, so it's not as sturdy as it would be in a full piece, but then the stitching allows it to get it back but remain malleable. So you can actually add yourself a nice even breaking point just by punching the holes and stitching along those lines. So I decided that's what I was going to do. Front and back on the top of this thing, I was going to punch two track lines and then just run stitches along them just to make sure that they were nice and tough still. And obviously you wouldn't just want broken stitch holes in your leather anyway, so from the moment I'd punched it, I had to stitch it. One of the things that I was like really backwards and forwards about with this thing was whether or not I was going to be using a Sam Brown button like I did on my dad's and Katie's, or a buckle like I did on my eldest. I know when I come to making my youngest, I'm going to be doing the same, very similar at least, as I've done for my eldest. So I was like, if these are going to be the way forward for how I make these pouches, let's get into using the buckles. Let's use them where we can. We'll save the Sam Browns for things like this. Buckle it was, which meant I now had to figure out what sort. Did I want it to just be black? Did I want it to just be basic? Did I want it to just blend in? Did I want to use the same technique I've been using, just folding over? Did I want to get thicker leather and make a nice strap? I decided what I was going to do was rinse and repeat. The same thing I've been doing. It works. I like the way it looks. Because it's leather folded on itself and then stitched down, it just makes it look better than just one strap of leather, even if you detail it. Personally, my eye is drawn more to layers. I think in terms of expense anyway, it feels like it looks more quality for having the extra thickness provided by time taken to actually build up that strap rather than just getting a bit of leather, cutting it, punching some holes in it and done. So we're going to do this. We picked our colours. I wanted it to match the underside of the gusset, so I used that same lined brown leather, which is really interesting stuff, I'll be honest. Again, it came from the stuff that we got from Tustin and Burnett. I'm going to be using that stuff till I'm 90. And then I decided to use a little trim of this purple purple that I've used on the top of the gusset to hold the actual strap down. The buckle's not so much of a problem, it's more making the strap. I wanted to make sure it looked good. Turned out pretty well, actually. The only thing that I was really left troubling over was getting this purple patch onto the front of it. I was reluctant to punch the square holes through to the black leather, but I'd already glued the black leather to the thing before I decided to do that, so there wasn't anything I could do about it. There's a square of stitches on the inside of the black thing now. It looks fine. I'm not worried about it. She's more than happy with it. To say that at this point she's had it for 2 weeks, she uses it every day, so there you have it, guys. At that, we are all done. We have an handbag for my mother to use. This was a Christmas present for her, for any of you who are wondering. It's been a little while, as I said. She's had this for a couple of weeks now. I'd made it even longer ago still. I think I made it at the start of December. She's used it near enough every day since she's had it, I think. That's an absolute win, because Mum's not easy to buy gifts for. But she enjoyed this one. She was reluctant to give it me back to do this video, to show you guys now. She was nearly like, no, it's got all my stuff in it. I was like, gives it. But how did it turn out? Personally, I think it looks great. These gold things that... Don't get me wrong, it's not the sort of leather that you'd specifically request, I don't think, but I think in subtle little embellishments, and when you can actually think of a creative way to use it, it's kind of cool. I think it works well coming off the purple. It matches the strap really nicely, and to be honest, you can't tell. The D-ring is silver. It kind of just blends in nicely. You can't tell it's not just full gold fitting all around. And the strap is very strange. It seems very 80s. I feel like she may have got this in her mod days. She'd been on about it for a while, ever since I'd made pretty much everyone else one. The only person left at this point is actually my youngest, and that's because she's the only person that hasn't really asked for one. She's getting one anyway. I won't be leaving her out. I'll be honest, this turned out great. And I've had a couple of people say, why aren't you selling these things? Why aren't you selling these things? Because I don't want to. I don't have the time to be making stuff to sell. I barely have the time to be making stuff to show. But I'm trying. We're so far through the next project now. That came as a bit of a surprise based off of a request that I received from a very uncanny character. We'll try and deliver for everyone that requests. You just need to start making some requests. I think at that we're about done. Let me know what you think, What would you have done differently? What do you think about the pattern? As I mentioned as well, Skilltree recently did a video doing this same style of pouch, and it hurt my heart so much because the detail that Clever puts into his projects is just shattering. To anyone who does this kind of thing and you're just like, oh, mine looks so boring now in comparison. But he did very kindly point out to me that, I still made this. That whether or not it looks the same as his, or better or worse, or as good or not as detailed, doesn't matter. I made it, and I should be proud of it regardless. And you know what? He's absolutely right. I'm super proud of how this one... I'm super proud of how they've all turned out, to be honest. Very rare I'd give myself one of these, but I continue to do so because it's good to learn things. It's good to try and find new things and get better at them and stick to them. And there's countless things I've tried to pick up over the years that I've never stuck to, or I've lost interest in, and this has been one of the few that's really taken a place. It's not something that I plan on stopping anytime soon. We've got plenty more ideas to come in the near future. Let us know in the comments if there's anything that you'd like us to try and do. For the most part, if we can, we'll try and avoid doing things that other people have done. I'd intended to do that with a one sheath video, and then when I actually searched one sheath after ours came out, I was like, oh my god, not only is there loads of them, but Skilltree has even done one. Mine's a one sheath, yours are all holsters, so it's fine. I'm English. At that, we are done. This has been a handbag being made. I hope to God that I've explained enough of it thoroughly for you. If I haven't, just let me know. That is the end of this video. If you haven't liked and subscribed already, feel free to do so if you enjoyed this. If you'd like to see more of it, let us know what you'd like to see. Been great having you along. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. Who knows what that one's going to be. Probably creation. Bye guys.